I'm a police officer in South Jersey. I've been doing this since I was 23. For the most part, it's not as exciting as it's cracked up to be. Not a whole lot happens in my county. Usually the worst calls are disturbance calls or an occasional shoplifting, with something a little more serious sprinkled in there once in a blue moon. I've done just about every possible shift there is. I did my time on the night shift, and there were definitely some weirder calls during the night shift than the day shift. But this one time I was working the night shift, I didn't get any calls. I was just cruising on a quiet road with no streetlights and woods on both sides. I saw the reflection of taillights suddenly approaching on the right-hand side of the road on the grass. As I got closer, I saw that the driver's side door was open. I started to veer onto the grass as I slowed down, fully planning on getting out to see if the driver needed assistance. I saw someone step out of the car, stand by the door for a second, then started to run into the woods. I radioed the codes for a suspicious person or vehicle, then got out of the car with my flashlight on and my hand on my holster just in case. In this situation, I had to expect the worst. I got to the front door of the car and looked inside, half expecting to see someone else sitting there, but the car seemed empty. There was a seriously foul odor emanating from inside the car, though. It smelled like a rotting animal. I called out to the woods, asking if anybody's there and needs assistance, and I stepped to the tree line, waving the flashlight around. I went back to the car to take a closer look inside the passenger side. There were multiple bloodied tissues and paper towels on the floor on the passenger side, as well as the rear seats. They were soaked in blood. The entire papers were dark red. At some point while looking inside the car, I heard footsteps inside the woods. I spun around with my flashlight and yelled, "Come out of the woods." I didn't see anyone. Someone was hiding in there, and that was confirmed when I heard a deep voice somewhere beyond the trees and shrubs. I had no idea what the voice said. I responded saying, "Show yourself, are you hurt?" I prepared to unholster my gun as I walked a little closer. I repeated myself, asking, "Are you hurt?" No response. The voice I heard before didn't sound like a person in pain bleeding out. Additionally, why would they run into the woods upon seeing a police car? Something was way off. I went back to the car and requested assistance. I noticed as I investigated the car further that it had no plates, and when I went back inside of the rear, I found something that made me almost puke from shock. There was something heavy wrapped in bloodied paper towel. I unwrapped it with my gloves on to find a severed hand, and it took me a hot second to realize what it was, because it was completely dark red soaked in blood. Now this situation went from a 5 to a 10. I radioed that there was a possible murder and needed backup. I now put my cruiser's lights on to help other officers more easily identify my location. When backup arrived, we did a thorough search of the woods, looking for possible blood trails. Nothing though. There were not even any blood trails leading from the car, which meant that the hand and blood on the tissues I found may not have been from the person who I saw run into the woods. Eventually the canine unit had to come and search for the person. Hours upon hours went into this search, well past dawn, turning up nothing. The vehicle was taken into custody. It had been reported stolen by a resident of a nearby town, who said he had no idea who could have stolen his car. Fingerprints had been collected from the steering wheel, and DNA testing had been done on the hand. There was not a single match to anybody in the database. To this day, there was never any progress in finding out who the driver of that car was, and whose severed hand that was. My partner and I are assigned to a unit in the sheriff's department that handles tethers, or ankle monitors. One night while looking for someone that absconded the program, we followed her last known location to a somewhat shady area of our county. Not many stops are routine, but this one was unsettling from the beginning. My partner walked to the front door, as I held the side of the house, keeping my focus on him and the side of the house. After knocking on the door, we could hear movement from inside. As the door opened, a middle-aged woman slowly peered out of the door and looked directly at me. There was no way she knew where I was standing. I was not in view of any window at the front or side of the house. What was strange was that most people would answer the person at the front door, not look at the side of the house first. After a moment, she let us in after we asked if she knew who Camille was, who we were searching for. She mumbled something to the effect that she was there. Things went from 0 to 100 immediately as she dropped to her hands and knees and started scooting on the floor, yelling for Camille. This lady had some obvious mental issues, and we figured this Camille was a caretaker of some kind. We both knew the situation was off, but started searching the house. The entire time this woman was yelling for Camille, never once getting back to her feet, just kind of following us on the ground. The time must have been around 8 p.m. and it was dark outside. At the car, though, it smelled like a rotting animal. Hurt. It's that she was house. What was strange was that I was not in view of any window at the front or side of the house. What was strange was that most people would answer the person at the front door, not look at the side of the house first. After a moment, 100 immediately as she dropped to her hands and knees and started knew the situation was off, but started searching the house. The entire time this woman was yelling for Camille, never once getting back to her feet, just kind of following us on the ground. The time must have been around 8 p.m. and it was dark outside. The inside of the home had one light on. There were no TVs or any electronics of any kind. The house had a strange feeling to it. The layout of this older style home had about 4 bedrooms and 2 floors. Every time I left a room, I swear I was in a part of the house I had not just been in. I would enter a hallway and seemingly be in another part of the house, like I entered a dimensional gap or something. The woman would sometimes be right behind me without making a sound. I was starting to question how all of this was possible. At one point, we both entered the upstairs, which looked to be a regular upstairs with bedrooms, or maybe a bathroom at the top of the stairs. As we tried to open the door, initially it would not budge. It appeared that it had been sealed somehow, like it had been painted over, and paint had dried in the seams of the door. After putting in a little extra effort, the door opened, revealing an attic, not bedrooms. If you remember Paranormal Activity, when the guy finds a picture of his wife and child in the insulation, that's what it looked like. There was nothing but storage space, insulation, and an older style light bulb with a string hanging from it. The lady was just sitting at the bottom of the stairs watching us, occasionally yelling for Camille. After what seemed like an hour of searching this house over and over again, going into rooms I swear I had just left, we called it and cleared the property. As we drove off, the woman was now standing right in front of the door, staring at us as we left. According to when we called dispatch and when we cleared, we were only there for 20 minutes. It felt like we were there for well over an hour or two. I don't know what was more unsettling, the fact that it was late at night, the lady yelling Camille's name and scooting on her hands and knees, her quietly showing up behind me when I had not heard her move, or the fact that she was standing at the door just staring at us as we left. We have not returned to that house. My family and I live throughout the middle of Georgia. Not many stories come out of this area, and this one I'm about to share makes us glad of that fact. My cousin, who I'll call Bob, has been a police officer for 5 years. He went into the force bright-eyed and optimistic. I guess like so many.
The next Ring camera footage happens in broad daylight. There appears to be nothing unsettling about what's being shown here. It just looks like a male holding what appears to be a box of candy, like one of those people that go door to door and try to sell you something to help support their cause. But what happens next will blow your mind. Here's what it looked like. I've seen many freaky Ring camera footages online, but nothing beats what I'm about to tell you. If there ever was a Candyman that existed in the real world, you're about to witness it. It happened about a month ago when I was home alone. The world would have never witnessed what unfolded if I hadn't installed a Ring camera on my front door. It happened on a Tuesday in broad daylight. I was working from home on my laptop when I heard my doorbell ringing. As a safety precaution, I always like to check the surveillance footage to see who was out front. There stood a gentleman that looked to be in his mid-20s, with a mask over his face, holding what appeared to be a box of candy. At first glance, he looked like one of those candy salesmen that sell chocolate door to door. I found this rather strange, as people who do this kind of thing were typically on the younger side, but I didn't see any harm in it. I ended up entering the foyer and opening the door, only to see the same individual I saw in the camera, except he looked more deranged close up.
Hi, sir. Would you like to buy some chocolate?
How much?
How much you got? You seem like you have a nice house. You must be loaded. How about you buy all my chocolate?
Kid, you don't just come to someone's house and request—
Shut up and buy my chocolate, rich boy.
How about this? Get the hell off my property and leave me alone or I'm calling the cops! Get on the floor, you little shit!
And that's when I got robbed point blank. It all went down in a split second. Several bandits ambushed and robbed my house, leaving myself and the candy seller dumbfounded. But after the local news stations got a hold of the story, it was later found out that the candy salesman was a part of the whole robbery scheme. He had been going to multiple houses around the neighborhood, posing as a candy salesman, only to lure people to open their front door.
A brazen robber posing to sell candy along with 3 other people are still on the loose tonight. The frightening daytime armed robbery home invasion that happened on Monday in Stockton has a lot of neighbors nervous.
What appeared to be a young man selling candy in a North Stockton, Murata area neighborhood quickly turned into a homeowner's worst nightmare. This neighbor, not the one robbed, captured video through his own Ring camera about 5 minutes earlier of the alleged candy man coming to his door. He watched a live feed on his home Ring camera as the phony candy seller came to his door.